So again, we read the sentence. Does it contain any existing events? No, it does not. And we can continue creating new annotations immediately and determine the targets, etc. again. So a costly learning exercise. So this is a brief intermittent subtitle. We also annotate those even though they are not full sentences, but they do convey a lot of meaning. So a costly learning exercise, that is a sentiment expression because it has a lot of sentiment information, opinion information that can affect an investor's opinion. So we select that with the sentiment layer selected in the right corner there to create a new sentiment annotation. What is the target? The target of the costly learning exercise is the event of spending. So what is the learning exercise here? That's the fact that they spend that much money, so it's an event. So we click here, click to activate. Next to the target is event field, and we double click the event. And that's when we get all our targets annotated here, I think. And then we can move on to annotate uncertainty, negation. There's nothing on that. And the polarity is again negative because that is not good for the company. And then we can move on to the next sentence. In March, Juno Therapeutics announced that it was ending development of JCAR015 after 5 patients with acute lymphoblastic leukemia, ALL, died from cerebral edema, brain swelling, in its phase 2 clinical trial. So we do have pre-existing event annotation here. So we have to start off with handling that. We double click to select it. And we have to determine its polarity. So its polarity is probably negative because ending development of a drug for a biomedical company is not a good thing. And we annotate polarity, negative polarity from the drop-down menu, and then we're done with this event annotation and we can click clear. Now we have to look for new sentiment expressions. And so I would say one that is not yet annotated and contains a lot of potential investor sentiment is the fact that the people died from cerebral edema in its phase 2 clinical trial. So we make sure that our previous selection is deselected. I did that by clicking the clear button here. Then I select the sentiment layer to annotate a new one. And then I'm just gonna drag, let's see, what is the minimal amount of words that expresses the fact that people died in a trial. In the trial. I would select almost the whole clause here. 5 patients with acute lymphoblastic leukemia died from cerebral edema in its phase 2 clinical trial. Or the alternative, which I think I'm gonna do because it's shorter, died from cerebral edema in its phase 2 clinical trial. I really want to capture died here is the essence, but I really also want to capture that it happened in a trial because that's important to the event. So let's select that. That's the minimal word span that you have to annotate. You see, the annotation is also not always easy. You have to decide like what is the least amount of words that still conveys, an accurate sentiment expression, but is still specific enough to the situation here. So now that we have annotated that, are there any others in the sentence? Not really. So we can go on to determine its targets. This sentiment expression is directed towards Juno Therapeutics, and I think the drug for which the trial was done. So those are 2 pre-existing target entities. So to add the first one, which will be Juno Therapeutics, we again click on the field, click to activate. Next to target is entity, because it is an entity. We double click Juno Therapeutics entity to create a link. And now to select a second entity, we have to do an extra step. We have to go to the select role field here, then click the drop down menu, click on target is entity, and then we have to click on add to select the second target So to select more than one target, you have to use the drop-down menu, click add. Then this will add another field with a yellow select to fill, and it means it's ready to select the second target. And then we double click on the drug because I think it is a target of this sentiment. And because we have multiple targets, we now have to think, is it different polarity for either one of them? And it isn't, because it's both bad for the drug and for Juno Therapeutics. So we can select negative polarity. And uncertainty and negation is also the same for either one of them. Now, if polarity or negation and uncertainty were to be different, we should make a second sentiment annotation on the same place as a previous one. But this will happen exceptionally and is explained in the guidelines when that applies. But this is the more usual situation where you have multiple possible targets and you have to annotate it with the drop-down menu here. So we select polarity, so we're done here, clear the annotation. And we will do one sentence more and then we will move on to the next document. The lethal side effect made it unlikely the treatment could get approved despite extremely strong efficacy data. So there's no pre-existing event annotations here, so we can go straight to annotating new sentiment expressions. One obvious one is unlikely, that it is unlikely the treatment could get approved. Let's annotate lethal side effect here, because that's something that expresses emotion in itself. And unlikely the treatment could get approved as another one. And despite extremely strong efficacy data, is also contains a lot of opinion. So I'm going to annotate extremely strong efficacy data as a sentiment expression. So there are quite a lot of sentiment, connotational sentiment expressed here. And we will annotate them all again in the same way. So the lethal side effect, so that target is again, it's a lethal side effect of JCAR 015, so that's bad for JCAR 015. And it is also a bad thing for Juno Therapeutics again. And we can go on to select Juno Therapeutics. Oh, I made a mistake here. It's not an event. I selected the wrong field. So target is entity, select it from the drop down, click add, it will create it, and now you can select Juno Therapeutics. Okay, so again we have two existing target entities. Arguably we could also select the treatment in the sentence, but the treatment refers back to JCAR 015. So we don't have to really select that, but let's just say we wanted to. So this is not an existing there is not an existing annotation except the one that we made on top of the treatment. So we have to make a new one, but it is an entity, it is a thing, the treatment. So how do we do this? Same as before, we click the drop-down menu, we click add, and now if you want to select a non-existing entity, so an entity that was not annotated before, we click and drag across it, and now it will create an entity annotation and a link in one go on top of that. Now we have to select the polarity, and it is negative again, because having a lethal side effect is not good for your treatment, your drug, or your company. We do the same for this. So the target, unlikely the treatment could get approved. They basically have the same entity targets here as before. And we select the same targets, and it is negative polarity again. Oh wait, there is uncertainty in this one. So here there is uncertainty. So we click uncertainty, yes. Uncertainty is expressed by unlikely the treatment could get approved. So there is a degree of uncertainty here. And it is not negated by a negation word outside of its context. So that we leave on no. but we do add uncertainty, and it is negative polarity because it has a negative effect on all the targets involved. Then we move on to the final one for this document that we will show you, and that is despite extremely strong efficacy data. So we double click on that sentiment expression. So what is the target? The efficacy data belongs to the treatment and the drug, probably. Yeah, and the drug, the treatment and the drug. So we select those two entities. And is it good for the company? Not really, because, even though the drug was efficient, the company does not benefit from it because it has been cancelled and disapproved. So we will not add the company as a target. If you would add it, it wouldn't be a big mistake. These things are quite hard to determine. So we have selected the targets. Is it uncertain? No. So there's no uncertainty. It's not negated. And it is positive polarity because it's a good thing that it was extremely effective. Okay. So for the purposes of the demo, we're going to move on to the next document to show you how to navigate that. Normally, before you would go to the next document, you would annotate all of the other sentences in the article, and then you would revise your annotations. You would read to the document again and check, is the polarity that you can see on here and the targets, are they correct? And then once you're done, you click on the next document button up here, and then you can do the same process for the next document. So that is the end of the demo for today. I hope I have shown you the interface. I will, of course, go over this with you live when I will train you in annotating. And if you have any questions, you can always email me. So thanks for staying with me and listening to this tutorial, and I will see you soon.